Welcome back to the Motion Design Hotline. I mean, we're back.
We've
been here for a while. Yeah, we're back. Evan and Kyle back on the boards, rising like a phoenix from the desert. Kyle, how are you?
I am spectacular, Evan. How are you?
I am hungry to solve some problems.
Oh, okay.
That's what we do here on the show. We take your motion design problems and turn them alchemy-like into wisdom, like the my brother, me boys, I guess. But if you have troubles, if you have some kind of movement problems, mostly in video, let us know in the chat. We are here to help. We are described by some as experts. You describe yourself as an expert, right?
I would describe you as an expert, and you would describe me as an expert. So I think that probably qualifies.
It balances each other. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we are we are mutually professed experts. So please let us know any of your motion design problems, any of your After Effects quandaries, what ails you. We want to help. We do have a handy form that you can use if you want to fill stuff out in advance. Get these ideas to us early. That's what we want. That way we can work on them and come with good ideas for you.
Slightly better, right.
So, yeah, more thoroughly thought out ideas. Now, we had a few of them come in. So as you know, we're going to be talking about displacement today. We're going to be talking about drop-down menu controls. But anything's on the table. Anything you want to talk about, let us know. Follow-up questions to what you see us doing. That's the premise of the show. Is there anything else we need to get to? I don't know. I want to say a big thanks to our mods hanging out. We've got Sam in here. We've got Annika hanging out in the chat. We've got lots of people keeping everyone on their best behavior. So only cool questions today, please. But yeah, Sam, good to see you. RB, Gareth Williams. Hey, Clever Devlin, what's going on? Whether you're making moving images or static images, we hope that the sound of our voice brings you tranquility and knowledge today. Yeah, I don't know. Anything else going on with you, Kyle, before we jump into it? Well, natural segue then. We do have some questions that we've culled from the forums, if people are interested in those. But I don't know, what do we, let's jump into kind of the first one. This one comes from a Nick Canton of nickcanton.com. And he asks, in Turbulent, not just a, but in Turbulent Displace, what's the difference between pin, locked pin? Is there a way to pin a corner or two adjacent sides? Any other remarks on anti-aliasing, resizing, etc. that might not be intuitive to those who are not super familiar? Oh, and apparently, Kyle, you've lost audio. Well, I can hear you, but that's interesting. Maybe Skype is betraying us. Let's see here. Hold on, Kyle. We'll get you back. How about now? I know. I know. Keep talking, Kyle. Bloody hell. Yeah, this is bothersome, Kyle, because you have. I know we're crushing it here. We are crushing it. Okay, hold on. Is this going to do anything? Not really. What the hell? Sorry for my cusses, everybody. This is not the kind of technical thing that we want to have happen. Yeah. Oh, I hope I don't have to call you back on Skype. Is there another way to get you back? this. Is this anything?
Is this something? I don't know. I'm gonna.
I'm seeing waveform.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna wiggle my fingers because apparently I'm doing interpretive dance now. And yeah, I mean that at least gives these nice people something to look at, even if they can't hear me.
Well, they should be hearing you.
Ocean.
All right. So Kyle, we're gonna look at your screen for a bit.
Okay.
What can you tell this good person who's having trouble with turbulent displaces?
Well, nothing, because that was your demo.
That's true. Well, okay, I'll answer that, and you'll follow up afterwards.
Okay.
So now we're gonna switch to Evan's screen.
Okay.
Good. People are confirming.
Yeah.
Audio is good. Oh, I got so flustered whenever things go.
Yeah, rightfully so.
So this person was talking to us about these various turbulent problems they're having. So just if you're not familiar, turbulent displace, here it is. I've put it on this adjustment layer, and turbulent displace, which you can grab from your effects and presets zone. Turbulent displace right there. Drag it on out. And wouldn't you know it, it is displacing things turbulently. You can rack through the evolution here, and you can see it undulating along. Right now, it is applied to a wonderful adjustment layer, which means everything under it is being displaced. Right? Now, what the trouble is what do we do about these nasty sides, right? If you don't want that, well, you can pin them. So they were talking about what is the difference between all these pinning options? Well, you can pin all of the sides, which, as you can see, kind of it becalms the edge. So those edges are being calmed down.
It's a technical term.
Yeah, becalmed, like wind. So with that in mind, you could pin all of them. You could pin just the horizontal parts, right? And we'll rack through that. You could pin just the vertical parts. You could pin all of the things you want. But they were saying, well, what do we do with these other things? What does locked mean? Well, sometimes the answer is a little bit evident when you start scrubbing through the evolution when you have the different pins selected, right? To Oliver, looks like a swimming pool. Yeah, a swimming pool, like from those famous ads that we see on YouTube about animating stuff. So the locked version, and we can see the difference right here. So I'm going to rack the evolution, and you see where the grid kind of meets the edge and how those are not moving at all. We might describe them as locked versus pin all, in which those are still sliding around, but there is something pinned there. So pinned means it's going to stay at that level and it's going to slide back and forth. Locked is not sliding, not moving away from that baseline, right? So neither of those is going to be it's going to be happening. Now, follow up on the question though is I want to pin two adjacent sides. So okay, well I'll just pin the left. Okay, now I would also like to pin the bottom, but there's nothing in here but combining those ideas. So what we want to do is use something else, something other than the turbulent displace.
Sneaky.
So
is that even allowed?
This is a crime that I'm describing. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn on the displacement map. Now, displacement map is actually very similar to if we were going to use turbulent displace. So imagine, if you will, just imagine in your mind.
I will.
Okay. That turbulent displace and displacement map, what if I tell you those are actually the same thing, but one of them is just giving us more manual control than the other? So the displacement map, we are wiring in, we're saying, what do you want to use as a map? Whereas the turbulent displace has already decided that it's going to use turbulence. And what is turbulence? Well, turbulence is a bunch of black and white values like this particular layer here, which is just a map of fractal noise, Gaussian blur, levels, right? So this is just creating this type of black and white field back here. And if I were to use a displacement map, and that displacement map were to observe that fractal map that I created, you will see it's performing pretty much the exact same thing. Pixels are moving every which way depending on the black and white values that they're kind of overlapping and interfacing with. Now, if I change this to a different map, the one that I've called pinned on a couple of sides, what I've done with that is I have made gray areas on the top and side here, because gray areas will not move left, right, up, down. They won't move at all. right? Those are the neutral zones. And then everything else, I can undulate a fractal in there, and we've created movement. So to cook up something like this, we start with a fractal, right? And then I added over top of that a Gaussian blur. And then I used some levels to kind of clamp those ideas down. So levels is a nice, quick way to clamp things if you need. And then finally, on top of that, I am using a fill. So this is just a fill effect that I've renamed. Call it fill. And we can use a mask, if we call up the mask here, to subtract this area. And then within an effect itself, within the fill, you can come on down into the compositing options, and you can say, I only want the fill to appear where the mask allows it, and this mask is set to subtract, and we're feathering so that that is happening. So I've created this sort of an image using effects. We use that as the map, so we can expect gray areas to not undulate at all, and the fractally areas to undulate more. Therefore, we end up with this sort of an idea. And if we take our fractal noise and I just rack that evolution through, you're going to see that, yes, indeed, we have different parts of the flag fluttering here as if it was pinned on those two sides. So that's kind of hopefully helpful. I don't know. Let us know if that makes let us know if that makes sense in the chat, if that's helpful. I don't think Nick is here, but if he were, I hope he would say he liked that.
You know, I want to take a second here and call out the effect mask that you were using there, because I think that's a thing that a lot of people overlook.
True. And I don't know, Kyle, should we cut to your screen if you want to?
We can. I'm set up more for explaining displacement mapping in a little more detail here. Do you want to just kind of quickly show us, like, kind of how you link that that mask up to an effect, or vice versa?
So any mask, any effect, anything you would like, you can cook this up. So let's just go ahead back to the project level, show you what it would look like from scratch. You've got a wonderful composition. Maybe we bring out a solid of some kind. Here's a lovely black solid. And we want to apply something to this. I'm going to say a fill. Put a fill on that. Blanc. And I only want the fill to exist in certain areas. Say here. Now, if you draw a mask out by default, the mask is set to add. And what a mask is doing is it's saying, let's only observe this part of the layer. And so you can come into the effects, twirl into the effect, come on down to the compositing options, add, hit the old plus like this. And would you look at this now? It's got this little sort of being masked icon. I am being masked, as you can see here. And what happens is as we move this around, only where this mask is, because it's adding to the area where the fill is. So we could go ahead and add like a ramp onto here. Bloink. So just put a little ramp. Let's use some more brand appropriate colors, perhaps something in a dark purple. Washing into sort of we'll say like a brighter pinker hue like this, really getting vapor wavy with it out here. And then this one we're going to bring into that wonderful bright yellow like this. And because everything can be modified with the mask, if I call up that mask options feather this out a little bit, you can see that you can create, I'm going to say like interesting and a little bit more complex elements by combining things in these ways that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise sort of considered. It's increasing the ability of our drawing tools to make things that are, I don't know, actually kind of interesting. So hopefully that makes sense. Jack, good to see you hanging out. Let's see. I know we're kind of the anchor of the day, so if anyone's hanging out, having a good time with us, learn some movement, and importantly, ask us quandaries. Give us the quandaries. We must know. We must know what ails you. So yeah, that's applying masks and containing effects with them. Yeah. Go back to the two-shot and see if our audio levels are still with us.
Hopefully. Yeah, I'm glad you talked through that quickly. I use that technique all the time. It's a great way to save yourself some layers sometimes. But it's handy to be able to kind of wedge things in between other effects sometimes if you're doing sort of a more complex stack. I use that all the time with if I'm applying gradients to text, for example, and I want to use a single text layer and apply, let's say like white to blue over the text. You could do multiple instances of the gradient ramp and like kind of use different masks for that. Like there's a lot of lot of different ways that you can use that thought process to save yourself some layers and some trouble, maybe.
Yeah, and I personally tend to use it a lot more on footage. So you can track masks onto footage using the old track mask feature. Not a track matte feature. That's a different thing.
It is.
Anyway, we have lots of things that sound similar and do similar things, but you're able to basically track the patch of a mask and then maybe use that to apply like a curves or levels adjustment if you just need to do like spot treatment. Maybe the lighting on the day wasn't particularly good. You can also use it as reactive lighting. So if you have visual effects elements that are supposed to be sparking off and doing something, this is a great way to add fills and tints only to certain patches of the footage.
Totally.
And really track it in. All right, good. We've done it. We're 16 minutes in. We've answered the heck out of a question.
Wow.
Crushing it.
And now, as is our style, we're going to answer that question even harder right now.
That's right. Here on the Motion Design Hotline, a question is not answered until we've answered it thrisely. This is our toll for the ferryman. So, Kyle, let's jump over to your screen, see what's going on. I'm going to furiously monitor audio levels.
Okay.
Hopefully things don't fall off.
Great. Okay, here we are. So I'm just going to talk about displacement mapping a little bit more here because it's a very, very useful thing, but it's a little funky to wrap your head around. I think Evan's example is really good, but this right here is like a really clear, straightforward thing to kind of show you exactly what's going on. So you might remember that he talked about when you're using displacement mapping that gray is neutral, okay? So once you kind of understand how this works, you can use it to very great effect. So I have just an image here, and then I have the displacement map effect on that pointed at that map that's visible here. So you've got absolute black here, absolute white, and 50% gray in the middle. So if I start cranking up the vertical displacement on this effect, you'll start seeing what happens. So white and black are going in opposite directions, right? And then that gray does nothing. So kind of think about how that works. You can create all kinds of interesting stuff. I think Evan's example of that turbulent displace was great. If you want to, there's a lot of kind of stylized VFX stuff that relies on this idea. Here I just have some particles, white and black, and I did a pre-render of that just so it runs a little faster here. But I'm using that same idea here, and then you can pretty easily create stuff like, you know, the effect of water on a window, like it's raining. So if you need to generate an effect like that. And then pretty much every like glitch transition that you see is based on this displacement mapping concept. So here is a generated layer with some fractal noise, which is pretty much the same as the turbulence that Evan was using. And then just a shape layer circle here using the displacement map effect again. And then I'm going to horizontally displace that. And so you'll see, based on those white and black values, it's going to push these in different directions, right? And then you can animate that fractal noise layer in whatever way you see fit. You could do the evolution. You could animate the transform, so things sort of push through it. You do this fast, you do this slow. You can get all kinds of really interesting effects here, right? I also made one based on a grid. This is this concept is thanks to Victoria, who I believe is in the YouTube chat, one of the product managers over at After Effects. And so this is using that exact same sort of idea with the grid effect and just showing that you can do some really neat stuff here. This is just that same kind of fractal noise. It's blurred this time. And then it's just offset horizontally here. And you can make some really interesting kind of abstract line art. Just depends on how much you need to dial it in.
Oh, Kyle, I've got great news. Our first chat-based question.
Yes.
Coming to us from Tim Mobest. Tim asks, the Photoshop displacement map filter accepts 2 channels to displace the X and Y separately. Can you do a similar thing in After Effects?
Okay, you so can. So here. So in this effect, which is called displacement map, and it lives under distort, I believe. Yep, there we go, displacement map. So in this effect, let's do it up here. You have horizontal displacement and vertical displacement. And in both cases, this gets kind of deep because you can choose like what channel you're looking at for this displacement. I'm just doing luminance because it's much easier to explain. And then you choose like which layer and some other details here. But so you can displace. This one's going to be a little weird because it's set up to be a very horizontal example. But you can displace horizontally and you can displace vertically. And if you wanted more individual control over those for some reason, and this setup didn't work for what you wanted, you could always just duplicate the effect and do the other value that way. Although I can't really think of a reason why you'd probably need to do that.
To make your glitches even glitchier, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
Exactly. I will say there probably could be times where you might do, say, one like this and then duplicate it and do like a smaller instance of this pointing to a different layer. If I wanted to have like another map layer, I'll name this map 2, and I could sort of adjust the the settings here to make the values different. That's how you can start getting some very, very sort of different glitchiness going on. I think I've made this not as good here. There we go. Let's make it much smaller. There we go. So you can kind of layer up your glitchiness here by using a second map.
And sort of on that kind of note, right? Like we're sort of painting when it comes to that, right? We're making big strokes, we're making little strokes, using some effects and maps to deal with large scale things, smaller scale things. I don't know. I find it's so interesting when you look at really complex visual effects stuff, how it's really just a combination of a whole bunch of little things,
right,
that make it happen. So
just like how when you're drawing, sometimes you kind of think like, oh, okay, I can break this down into like a circle and a circle and a triangle. A lot of these effects are kind of that same thing. You have to sort of think of the pieces and then kind of approach it like that.
Yeah. And I like this follow-up question. Can you always stream when I'm working in After Effects?
Yes, absolutely, Tim. We'll be right on that.
That is, of course, a service that we're more than eager to provide. Speaking of services and providing, hold on. Let me just jump into my screen real quick.
Okay,
here.
I have a segue too. You go ahead and do yours. But Victoria over on YouTube brought up something about wave warp, which happens to be one of the next examples I have ready. But I feel like we should ping pong this, so it's all you.
Okay, good. Well, I just wanted to mention, because someone got at me on Instagram, find me on Instagram at EC Abrams. They were asking me, they were trying to displace things, but the displacement, they wanted to go in and out, not left and right, right? They wanted to scale kind of up and down. So, if we come back to this idea, we've got this grid, we want to displace things away. So rather than translating them, they wanted to scale them. So let's make another adjustment layer on here, and I will create sort of a new map. So let's make a new solid, why not? And let's go ahead and put a ramp on this, a gradient ramp, not a linear one, but a radial one. And we want, of course, like this. So we'll say this is our ramp. And what we want to have happen, what we would really like, would be so good if the pixels towards the center were scaled in one direction, pixels towards the outside were scaled in a different direction. Surely there must be an effect for that. So
there is, but don't call me Shirley. My name's Kyle.
Of course. Oh, I see here that we've been canceled.
Oh, whoops.
Too cringe, Kyle. You set off our cringe alert.
I've got bad news. There's going to be a lot of those kinds of jokes on this show.
Yeah, I've got good news and bad news. So one of the effects that maybe you don't think about for this is the caustics effect. Now, caustics are when light goes through refractive mediums, we'll say. It produces this kind of blue color because the water is blue. And I'm just going to change that to be white. And well, actually, I'll just change that to be gray, so black, so it doesn't really affect what's going on. The point
Spoiler
is,
alert, here comes that swimming pool.
that's right. It's swimming pool time. So we're not going to deal with the bottom. We're not going to deal with the sky. We're only going to deal with the water. The water's surface, we're going to direct to that scaling idea. We're going to say, do it post effects and masks. And you can see, if you look at that, it's like we've got a weird little bubble going on out there. So we can help smooth that out a little bit. We can change the wave height up and down. So if we were to put the wave height at around 0, it's not going anywhere. We can change the water depth, which will again affect how the caustics are displacing things. But this is another form of displacement used to great effect, we'll say, by Aaron Stern recently. I think he had a tutorial out on his YouTube channel that was a lot of like displacement waves coming out of somebody's hands, like some X-Men style stuff. But this is, again, producing another form of displacement. And then we'll just drag this over here to let people know there is an entire ecosystem of other plugins out in the world. This is, of course, Displacer Pro by Plugin Everything. It is free. Head on over to AE Scripts to check that out. But this is, again, someone has taken a look at the various problems that confront them and said, hey, well, what if we did have translation, scale, anchor point changes, all kinds of behavioral things you can change using displacement maps. Okay, that is my cut in with that. So Kyle, what do you got for us? What's the follow-up on this thing?
Well, you know what? I might segue to a segue here, because I have an interesting thing that I have in this project built with Wave Warp. Wave World. I have a Wave Warp thing also. Wave World is traditionally the thing that you use to make that swimming pool look. That's like we're just on the cusp of here. If you want to bring up my screen for a second here, I actually had this exact example already built. This thing that, of course, Evan is referencing, that we see all the time. So Wave World is one of these effects that just generates a white and black field, but with wavy motion that is kind of heavy to render here. And then when you use caustics, you can make that bottom of the pool look. But I happen to have another example here using this Wave World. The cool thing about it is that it can bounce off the sides. And so if you think about what it's doing and put that piece together, you could do something like have very organic motion on just a line, for example, by using a displacement map, looking at those white and black values. So I thought this was a fun little example to throw in here real quick and just kind of help people realize, like, that's not just for making the bottom of the pool look from that one tutorial.
Not just for pools anymore.
So I do have this Wave Warp example, which we will have to sort of introduce what the problem is. Should we first deal with the drop-down question, since that's in the title of this show?
I suppose so.
Okay.
That does make sense. Very well. So, drop-downs. Let's drop it down like it's hot. So, as we promised in the title, we're going to talk about drop-down menus, switching gears hard to get into a bit more of chunk. That this is a bit more of a coding conundrum. So here, let me pull up our quandaries that have come in. And this was kind of a blanket one. We've rephrased. This is from the Adobe forums, from those community forums. And they were asking about, they're trying to make templates, right? Templates for a show or whatever it is. And they want to be able to basically switch between styles or configurations of things using the drop-down menu control. Now, if you're not familiar with the drop-down menu control, it is a wonderful way to control stuff. See, Ryan gets it. Let's drop it down like it's hot.
Yeah.
When the chat tries to get it from you, drop it down like it's hot. So let us observe. Drop-down menu control. What is the promise of these particular things? Well, imagine, if you will, you had two incredibly handsome people and a very well-designed logo.
A different show.
Yeah, for a totally different show. It's not related to this show. But here they are. We want this arrangement. This could be one style of template. This could be another one where someone is bigger for some reason. And then we come into the last one where things are more even and normal. But these are the much more egalitarian form of the template. So if we have these three arrangements and we want to combine them all together into one template, then we would want to, yes, please. Do it. Put them together. There are a few ways we can do that. Let's look at the perhaps easiest version of this. I've got those A, B, and C elements hanging out. We've got a cool background, a beautiful background, I would say, just really stunning. Yeah. And if we come into the effects, I have grabbed the drop-down menu. Now, the drop-down menu control, drop-down, all one word, menu control in the expressions controls family of effects. Lots of beautiful things hanging out in there. And you just drag that out and it will give you a menu. And the menu comes with 3 items, but you can edit that menu to have as many items as you would like. You can fill that up with all sorts of items. And the important thing to remember about these items is that they all have a number. They all have a number, they all have a name. So we could call this one good. We could call this one bad. We could call this one judgmental. So we've got these 3 elements. And they all have a number. So if we wanted to reference them in any way, we know that that is the value that they actually have. So here on each of these templates, if I call open their transparencies, their opacity here, and we twirl into this, I've made my text nice and big. We've got an expression going on. I'm looking at variable M, creating a variable M that is looking at that drop-down menu control dot value, specifically at the value of that menu control. That means if I select number 1, the value is 1. If I select number 2, it's 2, and so on. And from that, I can say if that M value, 1, 2, or 3, is equal to the index value of this layer, make yourself 100%, make this value 100, which would make the opacity 100, else, otherwise, in any other circumstance, be 0. Now, there are, of course, much more condensed ways to write this kind of thing, and I would urge anyone with expressions powers in the chat, give us your most condensed version of if-else statements, if you'd like. But this is, of course, for teaching purposes, one of the easier ways to explain it. So what does that mean? Well, as I cycle through this menu item here, we come to menu item 2, and it's a different arrangement. Menu item 1, it's a different arrangement, and that is because the opacities are being clicked on and off like a light switch. So now we're on to 2, and you see this goes 100, the other 2 goes 0, and you can implement this in all kinds of things. You can drop this into your essential graphics, so window, essential graphics, call up your drop-down menu, and you can put your menu up in here, and then people using this in Premiere would be able to swap things around. So think of that as like way 1 of dealing with your drop-down menu.
Do I need to keep track right here?
That's right. Please, Kyle, put on the big board way number 1. Now, another way you can do that is using what's called cases. Now, here, hit EE, bring up all the things that we have edited with our expressions, and instead... Sorry, go ahead.
I just said yowza.
Oh, good. Thank goodness.
So, you know what? This is a good time to insert. Roland asked a question, what issues do folks usually face when using the drop-down menu? And I think the biggest issue is that you have to know how to write expressions to be able to use them.
Problem number 1.
So if this looks scary, yeah, there you go.
If it looks scary, let us know, and
we'll try to de-scarify it. Yeah.
Exactly. We'll drag the monster out of the closet and yell at it. That's what we do. If you have children, they're afraid of monsters, just drag a mop out from under the bed and pretend to wrestle it, and then pretend that it's killed you, and then you return. And then either they will get revenge on the mop, but at least you'll know. So anyway, in this case, though, what we're doing here is we're using the switch operation. So again, we're looking at the variable named M. It's looking at the drop-down menu's value, so it's going to be 1, 2, or 3. Then we're going to set up a switch, and the switch will monitor M and say, hey, what's M doing right now? And then in case 1, meaning if M is 1, it's going to do this thing. If M is 2, it's going to do that thing. If it's 3, it's going to do that thing. And I have set these up to look at the keys. So I've got these keys out here, and those are just holding positional values. So if I were to say remove the expressions, we'll just disable those, we would be animating between these different positions here, right? That would be what's happening. But because we are overriding these things with expressions, then we're gonna just use the value that I've stored in each of them to reference them. So we're looking at what is key 1, what is key 2, what is key 3. And so now if I go back to the null and we change this from item 1, there we go. And then we go back to item 2. Wow. And then we go to item 3. Pew! It's moving in different places because I've set up that expression on the position and the scale to observe the different cases and give it a different value based on those cases. Now, with those kinds of things, you can do all sorts of stuff. Set it up to trigger things, to put them in different areas. These are just 2, let's call them methodologies for dealing with this. And I hope that you play around with it and do some stuff with it. Whew, there we go.
Yeah.
Our promised... Make sure we hit our promised deliverables here on this particular show.
Yeah, I think drop downs are one of those things. It's a little tricky for people to wrap their heads around. And I think if you've never made anything template-y, you might not have a lot of cause to use that. But think about if you've ever created a template of any kind, whether it stays in After Effects or is going into Premiere as a Mogurt. If you want the option to choose between 2 different colors, but they're specific colors, you don't want to give the person a color picker. You want to choose a specific blue and a specific red, or you want a couple different layouts or things like that. You want the opportunity to turn several layers on and off at once. These are cases when drop-down menus are really handy for that kind of thing.
I think, I don't know, I think it's one of those things that you don't realize how useful it is until you start using it. The other thing that's pretty critical is it can hold keyframes, right? So we can keyframe between these things if this is an element that needs to sort of hard change throughout things. So imagine, if you will, various emotional states on a character's face, right? You might be hard changing between those, or different morphemes of a mouth. A
character rig in general is a great example. You might have different hands or something too. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything that has like a hard switch, a hard replacement. Hands are a big one. Sort of turning, any kind of turning rigs that you're putting together might require this sort of thing. And it can also be addressed. You can address these things through expressions of their own if you so desire. So just keeping in mind that it is holding a particular value and cannot particularly animate. We'll say there is no between, right? There's nothing between 1 and 2. It's only 1 or 2 or 3. Right?
Yeah.
There's no 1.4 value. That'll cause all sorts of consternation.
This is drop-down menu is the replacement for, some of this stuff was possible before where you could use like a slider control to do this, but then those in-between values could happen. And that was a little messy to use. So the drop-down is a nice evolution of that. So off the top of my head, I don't remember this answer, but JC asked, it's obviously less likely to happen if you're using a drop-down, but does the switch statement just return value if the conditional is outside case bounds? Well, I didn't look closely at Evan's code there, but when I write switch, you can put a line at the bottom that says default. And so it gives you a default if for some reason it doesn't equal any of the values that you set.
Hey, let's quickly see what happens when you do that. So I've just added an item 4. There is no case 4. Now we go to it. Brr.
I don't see your screen, by the way.
Oh, sorry. Let's go to Evan's screen. Sorry, I got so excited to break this thing.
I know.
So if you have an item, you've got item 4, there is no case 4. Look at this. We now have 2 errors because those 2 expressions on position and scale were both referencing that drop down. Let us observe, hitting the old magnifying glass to go observe it. And tell me about the error, sir. What's going on? Undefined value used in expression could be out of range array subscript.
Could be.
Basically, we could be. After Effects is really good at sort of giving you some hints, maybe a little bit more passive aggressively than Kyle. It could be an out of array range subscript. What do you think? In this case, yes, because we have not accounted for the thing, and the switch is really specific. So anything that isn't a 1, a 2, or a 3 will cause this problem. So if you go to use switch in some other way, right, just be aware that if you're between the values, that's not going to be particularly helpful. So you'll either want to clamp the values or cap them, or like you said, applying a default or a kind of try catch. Or anyway, I feel like we're getting really into the weeds with very specific things. Kyle, do you have something that's more visual?
A little more accessible, probably. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Tim had a follow-up. Sorry. Okay. But why the switch? Can't you just say key M? Tim, you're absolutely correct. We could absolutely do that, because in this case, it does line up, right?
Yes.
The case 1 would be looking for the key indexed at 1. I don't know. This is one of those examples where I'm sort of bending the example to to show the thing. But these, I guess if I was thinking more linearly, I would have just made the case a sort of numeric value, right? This could be like 500 comma 500 or whatever you want to make it out of this. But yes, in this case, if you want to reference keys, go ahead and just drop that M value into that key value. You'll be away at the races.
Yeah, so you could probably make a little bit tighter code, since this one happens to line up. But like I have one written on my machine here that corresponds to colors, which obviously, it's basically saying if you choose option 1, choose this color, and then several more iterations of that.
Right.
It becomes whatever you need it to become. But obviously, writing expressions are dense here. So if you have questions about that specifically, that might be a good thing to kind of like just give a more overview of expressions on another show here. Let's see if, we have a question from Tommy Guitar over on YouTube here about something with the graphic equalizer, but which I like. Let me do my little wave warp example here, and we'll see if we have time to do something with the graphic equalizer, or maybe we could save that for the next show. We'll find out.
All right. Well, hey, it's really depending on time. We got 15 minutes. Let's get into it. Kyle, talk to me about what's going on for you.
Okay. So we have a question that came to us from the Adobe forums, and let's see. That was from Danny51, and that person was having a problem where they had used, and this was kind of me guessing here, but they had used the wave warp effect on a layer, and they were having problems where it was going outside the edges of the layer. And I thought this was a good follow-up to some of that displacement stuff we were doing, because sometimes you might run into this kind of stuff when you're using these distortion effects. And the issue here is that you can see, since I have the layer highlighted, that this layer has a bounding box. This is actually, this is just a shape that I made in Photoshop specifically to kind of break this, right? And then I'm using the wave warp effect, which does this kind of cool stuff, right? But you'll see when it runs into the edges, we're just having some problems here. So there's a couple different ways to address this, depending on what your element is. If you've made it directly in After Effects, it can be easier to deal with. But there's a nice little trick that you can do if this is an imported image. And I just want to point out that the original image here with no effect on it, it's just right up to the edges, because that's the way stuff gets cropped. If you bring in, say, a layered Photoshop file and you're cropping it to that layer, it's going to, line up exactly with these edges, and you might run into this sort of problem. So the solution for this is there is an effect called Grow Bounds. It's under Utility. And
oh, that's very interesting on account of wanting to grow the bounds of this image.
Right. One thing that's very important is this has to go above the other effect that you need, okay? And in this case, because of the way wave warp works, you're actually going to see wave warp move as I change this, but you're also going to see the edges actually come out. So what Grow Bounds is doing is it's sort of artificially increasing the size of the bounding box of this layer before this effect looks at it, and so then it won't get cut off, if that makes sense.
Right, because the bounds, right, are those dots that we see out there on the screen currently.
So that's good. If you ever, it's probably going to be a distort effect, but if you ever run into something like this where your stuff's getting cut off, Grow Bounds, more often than not, is going to solve your problem. Now, I do want to point out that if you had built this with, say, a shape layer, which is the case here, this is just a shape layer in another composition here. And you can see this one's getting cut off pretty badly. Now, most of the time, you can just click the little collapse transformation switch, which is the same as continuous rasterization if you had brought in an Illustrator layer. It's that little sun switch here. But that basically makes it so that After Effects doesn't respect these boundaries anymore. It's sort of reaching into that pre-composition. And so you don't need grow bounds if it were a shape layer, for example.
Yeah, I was going to say, for our remaining time, let us go over what is happening when we are collapsing those transformations. And like, so this is, we're talking about things that people are commonly sort of confused about, or things that really trip people up.
That's a big one.
This is one of the big ones. This is like the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I've brought in vector assets that don't look good, right? Oh, you gotta collapse those transformations / continuously rasterize them, right? Critical to do.
What?
So
3D is probably the best way to show it quickly, unless you have another idea.
No. Drop it down on people. You really just need to warp something in 3 dimensions, and then you'll see it explode right away.
So here, I will quickly make a second shape layer, and I'm going to, let's change the color. Power tip, if you Alt or Option drag on a color chip in the timeline, you can scrub colors that way, by the way. Okay, I'm gonna, let's look at the positions here. So this blue one is much further back, okay? But if I were to use this as a 3D object in here, let's take that wave warp off. You can see like it's still flat, so it doesn't really do what I want. But this collapse transformation switch, and this works for all kinds of things, which can sometimes trip people up. If you press this, it's going to reach into that composition and give you all the stuff. And if you'll notice, watch what happens to this layer's bounding box here. It's literally extruding into 3D space because one of these layers is 700 something pixels further back from the other one. Now, when this gets a little confusing is when you start using things like adjustment layers. What's a good effect that would really mess this up?
I'm trying to think. You mean to like really? I think if you just put a fractal on it.
I'm just thinking like a distortion effect or blending layers are a good way to really get weird here.
Shift channels, set mat. JC is suggesting.
Yeah, a lot of stuff like that. That like if you're trying to do something within this, tell you what, let's set this back to, let's see, trying to think of a, well, that's not working the way I want. Yeah, like
shift channel set mat. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, the thing that's tricky about this is like if you're creating a very specific look inside of a pre-comp, and then you bring it into another comp here, and you realize like, oh, I need a little more edges, or I need that 3D or whatever. Turning the switch on is going to bring everything, including lights and blending modes and all that. And so that you might get results that aren't what you expected when you come out into here. So you have to be very thoughtful when you're using this switch on a pre-composition is kind of the short version of it.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. It's one of these things that you really have to get like a lot of experience with it to anticipate what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It is one of the more esoteric things.
Go.
Yeah. That are gonna cause some trubs.
So I expanded this thing. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
I expanded this blue layer, just scaled it so it's up. These don't need to be 3D anymore. It exists outside the comp bounds here, and it's set to multiply. And so you can see here it's cut off. So if I want to see all that, boom, it's good. But well, I should be getting that. Aha, that's why. There's another little trick is that sometimes if you have an effect on a layer, it doesn't, and I say sometimes, I feel like always the case. If you have an effect on the layer, it doesn't necessarily push all that stuff through. But there you go. Now we're getting that, we're seeing the full bounds of that layer and the blending mode here. And so if you ever need to bring blending modes out, great. But if you don't want that, you need to set it up differently because they will come through.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, you can collapse things within a collapsed thing. It's a lot of metaphysical stuff.
Yeah, Tommy doesn't get what I'm trying to do with the object, and you know, I probably could have come up with a cleaner example for this. Sometimes when you're doing it off the cuff, it is not ideal.
And so speaking of things that are off the cuff, there's a question about a graphical equalizer. I'm doing it with a graphic equalizer now. I'm not totally sure. Kyle, do you know what that's all about?
So I'm guessing, at least, that this has to do with some of the audio effects, which can be used to generate. Sorry, these are going to be under generate, right? Yeah. Can be used to maybe generate like a graphic equalizer. Let's confirm here. I think this is a good example to maybe kick off the next show because I think this would take a little bit of prep to do properly. But Tommy Guitar Fender over on YouTube has been asking about the graphic equalizer. So if you want to kind of clarify what you're asking, sounds like a great example for us to do on the next episode.
Yeah, and some people are suggesting the audio waveform effect or the what's the cousin of that? The
spectrum,
audio spectrum. Those are fun things to create. Create little templates that respond to audio.
For example, if you were creating a little promo template for an RPG podcast.
Right, yeah. A hit RPG podcast.
Hey, an RPG podcast that might happen to be number 64 on the UK Games ratings, says one website.
Yeah, claims one website. That's an Evan Abrams, Kyle Hamrick side project.
It is.
Check out Creatures and Creatives whenever you like. No pressure. However, something I would like to pressurize people to do, because we are coming into the final kind of times of the program here. Hold on, I'll go back to the two shot.
Yep.
You know, if you have troubles, we need them. We must have your problems in order to power the show. So please make use of the form that you can use to send us your problems in early. Problems that come in early, jump to the front of the queue and
get better explanations.
Yeah, we spend a lot more time on those particular problems. Yeah, those are the things that we really desperately require your problems. They feed us vampire-like. Other people's suffering feeds us in that way, I guess. But we solve the problems, Kyle. We're not bad vampires. We're good vampires.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, like we're
ahead.
like medical leeches.
Just because we're talking about audio a little bit, I want to call this out real quick, as both Tim and Roland are kind of agreeing over here. Just because you can edit audio in After Effects doesn't mean you should. And I want to point out, we're not talking about editing audio, because I tend to agree with that opinion, except for very basic stuff. Using audio to drive effects, which does sound like a good thing to kick off our next show.
Sure. Hey, then we can have even more audio issues as we
perfect
fire up we really want to get into challenge mode when it comes to these streams. But of course, it's kind of that time where we must say goodbye. So thank you so much for being with us. And Kyle, I think you froze on the screen.
Did I?
Just momentarily.
Okay. Well, it's because I was so sad.
Right. That's true. Your tears leaked onto the keyboard. So in this case, what we must do, Kyle, where can people find you on the internet if they want to get at you directly?
Well, the best place to find me is at kylehamrick.com, which then has links to the various social media websites. You can find me as Kylosaurus Rex on Twitter and Instagram, and probably some other such places.
And you can find me at EC Abrams all over the internet. Don't go to evanabrams.com. It's broken. But if you want to send us questions, and we hope that you do, please use the link in the description and give us those troubles. We must have them.
We must.
Or you can always tweet them at us. We are available on there. We'll be posting up about when our next show is. I believe it is in 2 weeks from today.
327 says
Indeed.
the Post-it note on my desk.
Oh, good. So we have plenty of time to pull in these particular things. So please get them to us. But until next time, have a good day. Stay safe out there. And happy after effecting. We didn't discuss how we would close the show.
Well, I think that's as good as any. After Effects is great, and it's fun, and it should make you happy because you made something really cool. So happy after effecting. That's now our tagline, I guess.
Okay, good. We've nailed it. All right, everybody. See you next time. Oh, I don't know if that button worked.